So I wasn't even planning on doing this. And then, as you can see, because I'm just using my webcam, I'm not using the good camera because that's over there and I'm too lazy to get up. I'm gonna have to turn this off because this is distracting. That. And then I was thinking about it and I'm like, I don't read enough ever. Like, I need to learn how to read again. And I'm dyslexic as hell. And I'm like getting worse as I get older. So I'm like, okay, what can I read? What's over here that I've been planning to read that haven't read? Now I have Crooked Kingdom, but I've already like way into Crooked Kingdom. And I don't want to read that on here because Victor lurks in here, even when I tell him not to, and he's not where I am. So I don't want to read something that he is reading. So I was like, what else could I read that I already want to read? Now, and then I found two books that I had over here, and it was between Battle Royale and The Last Unicorn. I probably should have picked The Last Unicorn. Maybe I will still pick The Last Unicorn at some point. The names probably would be easier for me to read, especially with my dyslexia. Although the word Schmendrick is in there, so, it is what it is. But I did pick Battle Royale. Look how pretty. Battle Royale, pretty. I read the entire manga for this, and if you like bloody and gory and fucked up psychological shit, read that manga. And I am not joking. It's so good. I watched the movies. The first movie was really good. So watch the first movie. It's really good. Now I started this book and I got to page like 58, but I do not remember what the fuck was going on, so I'm just gonna restart it anyway. I'm gonna take that away and just restart. So I'm just gonna restart it. So first of all, I have random pieces of paper in here that I don't know what the fuck this is. This book is really nice too. Like, it's got like a whole fucking map. So like anybody who doesn't know what the premise of Battle Royale is, like, I guess I can read you the back. All right. Koshun Takami's notorious high-octane thriller is based on an irresistible premise. A class of junior high students is taken to a deserted island where, as part of a ruthless authoritarian program, they are provided arms and forced to kill one another until only one survivor is left standing. Criticized as violent exploitation when first published in Japan, where it then proceeded to become a runaway bestseller, Battle Royale is a Lord of the Flies for the 21st century, a potent allegory of what it means to be young and barely alive in a dog-eat-dog world. Made into a controversial hit movie of the same name, Battle Royale is already a contemporary Japanese pulp classic, now available in a new English language translation. Yeah. It's like 10 shades of fucked up. All right. It's amazing. It's really good. I quite enjoyed it. That's why I wanted to read the book, just to see. All right. Anyway, moving on. I need to do something for my dyslexia, and I figured that this might be something. And I need to force myself to start reading again anyway, because I do a whole lot of fuck all. So I'm like, okay, time to read. All right. So this is the class list of the kids that are actually going to be involved in the battle royale. Now I'll show it to you. And then I can try to read them all. So for the boys, so this is 9th grade, Class B, Shirawa Junior High School, the class roster. Yoshio Akamatsu, Keita Ijima, Tatsumichi Oki, Toshinori Oda, Shogo Kawada, Kazuo Kiriyama, Yoshitoki Koninobu, Yoji Kuramoto, Hiroshi Korinaga, Ryohei Sasagawa, Hiroki Sugimura, Yutaka Seto, Yuichiro Takiguchi, Sho Tsukioka, Shuya Nanahara. Oh, Nanahara. Shuya Nanahara, Kazushi Nida, Mitsuru Numai, Tadakatsu Hatagami, Shinji Mimura, Kyoichi Motobuchi, and Kazuhiku Yamamoto. Sorry, as I'm reading some of these, I'm remembering some of these names. I'm like, oh, I remember you. I also remember how some of them died. I'm like, whoop, gotta get there. All right, and then for the girls, we have Mizuho Inada, Yuki Utsumi, Megumi Ito, Sakura Ogawa, Izumi Kanai, Yukiko Kit, Kitano, Yumiko Kusakawa, nope, Kusaka, sorry, excuse me. I told you, I'm dyslexic and I keep moving fucking letters around. Kayoko Kotohiki, Yuko Sakaki, Hirono Shimizu, Mitsuko, nope, Mitsuko Soma, Haruka Tanizawa, Takuko Chigusa, Mayumi Tendo, Noriko Nakagawa, Yuka Nakagawa, Satomi Noda, Fumio Fujiyoshi, Chisato Matsui, Kaoru Minami, Yoshimi Yahagi. And I am so sorry if I mispronounced any of that. I am trying my best. All right. So there are opening remarks. Does anybody care about the opening remarks? No, I don't. It's just like about pro wrestling, and I don't care about that. Okay, anyway, so we're going to go to the prologue. So the prologue is the government memo top secret. International. Oh my God, already. Fuck me with this goddamn shit. I'm going to preface this by saying I used to be in honors English. I don't know what that says about my schooling system, but I did used to be in honors English. I promise. Memorandum. Whatever. Whatever. Okay, that's that. I'm going to take these off so I can actually fucking read. All right, 1997 0038 7461. From the Director of Defense, Special Planning Department of the Secretariat of the Leader, Chief of Combat Experiments, Non-Aggressive Forces Staff Office. 2. Supervisor, Republic Combat Experiment 68th Program, Trial Number 12, 1997. On May 20th at 1815, a routine inspection by Central Processing identified evidence of an intrusion into the operation system. The incident occurred in the early hours of March 12, and our utmost efforts are focused on the investigations for traces of any possible subsequent unauthorized access. The identity and objective of the perpetrator, as well as the extent of the compromised data, remains under investigation. The method of intrusion employed a high degree of skill, and uncovering the full picture of the damages will likely require significant time. Upon retrieving a report that could not rule out the possibility that damages extended to data from the 68th program, the Office of Defense and the Special Planning Department of the Secretariat of the Leader and the Combat Experiment Division in the Non-Aggressive Forces Staff Office jointly held an emergency exploration into a possible delay of the 1997 trial number 12 of the same. I hate important documents because they just say the same things over again. Sorry, that was me interjecting. That's not in here. However, in view of the fact that preparations for trial number 12 are already complete and with no evidence yet found of the leak of related information to the general public, the deliberations resulted in the decision to conduct the trials as planned. Despite this conclusion, we will pursue a swift investigation into necessary changes for trials number 13 and beyond, and will be devoting special attention to revisions of the current Gaudal Canal system. Sorry, that word is like broken in half in a weird way. Gaudal Canal system. Nevertheless, given your role as supervisor of trial number 12 and as the director of its execution, you are to proceed with the utmost caution. Furthermore, this incident is classified top secret and is to be treated as such. Oh shit, I forgot to do what I meant to do. So, sorry. Because you don't need to be looking at my whole face. So, there we go. Ta-da! The top one is from the manga, from the Battle Royale manga. The bottom is from the movie, and the other bottom is from the book. Ta-da! Part 1, the game begins. 42 students begin. Chapter 0. As the bus entered the prefectural city of Takamatsu, the scenery slowly shifted from pastoral to urban. With the city came lights in multicolored neon headlamps from oncoming traffic, and in offices left to shine through the night. A group of men and women in sharp business suits stood talking in front of the roadside restaurants, perhaps waiting for a taxi. Weary, cigarette-smoking youths squatted in the sterile parking lots of convenience stores. A blue-collared worker perched on his bicycle waited for the crosswalk signal to change. The evening was still a bit chilly for May, and the man's disheveled, threadbare windbreaker made him stand out, just one of many fleeting impressions flowing beyond the bus windows, swept away by the low rumble of its engines. The digital clock above the driver's seat changed to 8:57. Shuya Nanahara, boy number 15, ninth grade class B, Shiraiwa Junior High, Shirawa Town, Kagawa Prefecture, was seated on the left-hand side of the bus, gazing off into the nighttime scenery. He had to lean forward a bit to see around Yoshitoki Kunaba, boy number 7, who occupied the window seat, rustling through his travel bag. With his right leg stretched out to the aisle, Shuya flexed his toes against the inside of his Keds sneakers. Oh my god, Keds. The canvas torn inside the heel, frayed threads sticking out like cat whiskers. Those shoes were hard to come by these days, although supposedly that hadn't always been the case. No, it hadn't. The brand was American, and the sneakers were made in Colombia. Though this was 1997, the Republic of Greater East Asia certainly wasn't lacking for goods. If anything, it overflowed with them. Imported commodities were extremely difficult to acquire. Well, such was only to be expected with the national policy of quasi-seclusion, especially so with a hostile country like America. Government officials called it the American Empire, as did school textbooks. I mean, America sucks, so sorry. From his seat near the back of the bus, Shuya surveyed the cabin. Under the dim fluorescence filtering through dingy ceiling panels, he had a view of the other 41 students who had been his classmates since the 8th grade. After leaving their school in oh god, this fucking school. Shiroiwa. I'm gonna get this right. Shiroiwa. 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 After leaving their school in Shiroiwa less than an hour before, the kids were all still excited and chatting away. They weren't overjoyed that their school trip was beginning with an overnight ride imposed on them, either out of cheapness or possibly due to an overpacked schedule. But once the bus passed over the Great Seto Bridge, got onto the Sanyo Expressway, and was on its way to their destination in Kyushu, they would calm down a little. Toward the front, a rowdy cluster of girls bubbled around the teacher in charge of their class, Mr. Hayashida. Among them was Yuki Utsumi, girl number 2, class leader and representative for the girls' side with braided hair that looked good on her. Also in the group were Haruka Tanizawa, girl number 12, her teammates on the volleyball team, and quite tall for a girl, Izumi Kanai, girl number 5, daughter of the town councilman with a prim attitude to match, Saltomi Noda, girl number 17, a gifted student whose round-framed glasses suited her calm and collected countenance, Chisato Matsui, girl number 19, ever meek and demure, and a few others. They formed the popular group, or anyway, the middle-of-the-road group. Though to call them a group at all might not be quite right. Girls tended to form cliques, but not so in the Shiroiwa junior high 9th grade class B, where there weren't really any to speak of. The closest to a clique would be the group led by Mitsuko Soma, girl number 11, who was a little rough around the edges and, to be frank, a juvenile delinquent. Hirono Shimizu, girl number 10, and Yoshimi Yahagi, girl number 21, made 3. From his position, Shuya couldn't tell where the girls were sitting. The first row behind the driver's seat was slightly elevated, and its shorter backrest revealed 2 heads side by side belonging to Kazuhiko Yamamoto, boy number 21, and Sakura Ogawa, girl number 4, the closest couple in class. Aww. Every so often their heads shook, likely in shared laughter at some joke, while with the pair as reserved as Kazuhiko and Sakura. Yeah, Sakura. Sakura? I never know if it's actually pronounced Sakura or Sakura. Is both correct? I know it's Sakura. 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 Let me know. Is either correct, or is like one more preferred than the other? Yeah, you go to bed, sir. You have like work in the morning, and I am just fucking around. So you go to bed. I thought I sensed you here. Go to bed. Okay. Anyway, back to what I was doing. I'm just gonna say the name, and somebody can correct me at some point in the future. Um, not. I want to say words, but never mind. Okay. Where the pair is reserved as Kazuhiko and Sakura, the most trivial talk might seem hilarious. Shuya glanced up the aisle to see an immense school uniform protruding into the space just ahead. Inside that uniform was Yoshio Akimatsu, boy number 1. Yoshio was the largest kid in the class, but he was sensitive, the type that ended up teased and picked on. He was scrunching his bulky frame forward, buried in the largest popular portable video game. The jocks, Tatsumichi Oki, boy number 3, handball team. Handball. Kazushi Nida, boy number 16, soccer team. And Tadakatsu Hatagami, boy number 18, basketball team. They all sat together, flanking the aisle. Shuya himself had been in Little League and was even called the ace shortstop, and used to be good friends with Tadakatsu until the two had drifted apart, possibly because Shuya had quit playing baseball. Replacing the sport with more unpatriotic hobbies, like the electric guitar, was likely part of it too. Shuya had seen to Tadakatsu's mom get uptight about those kinds of things. After all, rock music was banned in the Republic. There were, of course, ways around that ban. Shuya's guitar was more officially permit sticker that read, "Use of this musical instrument in the production of decadent music is strictly prohibited." Decadent music being rock. Now that he thought about it, Shuya realized he had made a completely new set of friends. A quiet laugh came from the seat behind Big Yoshi Akamatsu. It belonged to one of his new friends, Shinji Mimura, boy number 19. Around the edge of the seat, Shuya caught sight of Shinji's short hair and the finely crafted earring in his left earlobe. When they became classmates the year before, Shuya had already heard of the third man and the ace guard on the basketball team. Shinji was proud of his exceptional athleticism, on par with the ace shortstop. Shuya, though Shinji would certainly jest, "I'm better, baby." During a school field day held soon after class placement, the two discovered they made a great duo and hit it off right away. But there was more to Shinji than just sports. Though his grades were merely average, aside from mathematics and English, Shinji possessed a staggering breadth of knowledge and a perspective far beyond his years. Ask him most about any question, and he'd have the answer right away, even down to typically unobtainable information about foreign countries. And he'd always have advice in a time of need. Despite all that, Shinji didn't have an arrogant bone in his body. Well, he did have his own way of joking, like the time he said, "Everybody knows I'm a genius, haven't you heard?" But there was nothing offensive about it. Basically, Shinji Mimura was a good guy. Seated beside Shinji was Yutaka Seto, boy number 12, who had been the athlete's friend since elementary school. Yutaka was the class clown, and one of the quips was probably what had sparked Shinji's laughter. One row behind the pair was Hiroki Sugimura, boy number 11. Hiroki, reading a paperback, had somehow managed to fold his lanky frame into the narrow seat. Taki turned and a student of martial arts, Hiroki had an intimidating presence and kept mostly to himself. But once Shuya had tried talking to him, he found the boy to be a nice, if shy, and the two got along surprisingly well. The paperback was probably one of Hiroki's prized anthologies of Chinese poetry. Chinese literature books were fairly easy to find despite being translations of foreign works. But when they would be, as the Republic proclaimed China, our sovereign territory. There was a line Shuya read once in an American book he'd salvaged from the store corner from a used bookstore, relying on a dictionary to make it through. Friends come in and out of your life. Maybe that was true. Perhaps he would drift apart from Shinji and Hiroki and his other friends like he had with Tadakatsu. Or not. Shuya glanced at Yashitoki Kuninobu in the adjacent seat, still rustling through his bag. They at least had been together this far, and he didn't see anything changing that. Shuya and Yoshitoki had been friends ever since they were still wetting their beds in the pompously named House of Mercy and Love, a Catholic institution for children who had lost or who were no longer allowed to live with their parents. They seemed destined to be friends, whether Shuya wanted it or not. While we're on the subject of explanation on religion in the Republic might be in order. The government was a unique brand of National Socialism with the leader-wielder of supreme power and its leading symbol. Once Shinji Mimura had scowled and said, "This is what successful fascism looks like. Is there anything as evil anywhere in the world?" But the leader didn't enforce a state religion, aside from the belief in his political system, which itself didn't clash with any established faith. Citizens were free to worship as long as their activities remained within certain bounds, though the complete lack of any legal protection meant that only the most devout persisted, and only in meager efforts. Shuya himself had never been particularly religious, but he did feel gratitude towards religion. He recognized that the church had given him a comfortable childhood and had raised him into a decent young man, if he could be called one. Secular state-run orphanages did exist, but by reputation were lousy facilities, poorly run, notorious as training grounds for future soldiers in the non-aggressive forces. Shuya looked over his shoulder toward the rear of the bus. Sitting in the long bench seat of the last row were the bad boys. Ryuhei Sasagawa, boy number 10, Mitsuru Numai, boy number 17. A third was at the right-hand window. Ryuhei Sasagawa had left a couple seats empty between. Though the seat backs blocked his view of the third boy's face, Shuya recognized the distinctive haircut, slicked back and hanging long atop a head that remained perfectly still, unperturbed by the dirty jokes and coarse laughter of the other two at his left. The youth may have been sleeping, or perhaps, like Shuya, had been captivated by the city lights. Why, that boy, Kazuo Kiriyama, boy number 6, had shown up to something as childish as the school trip was the greatest mystery to Shuya. Kiriyama was the leader of sorts of the area delinquents, Ryuhei and Mitsuru among them. Though by no means big, he couldn't have been taller than Shuya. Kiriyama could easily subdue a high schooler and even took on a local yakuza. He had become a prefecture-wide legend. His father being the president of a leading local enterprise probably helped, but there was no more to his stature than that. Shuya had heard rumors that Kiriyama was a bastard child. Uninterested, he'd never bothered to look into it. Kiriyama had a handsome, intelligent face, and his voice, though not deep, was intimidating. His grades were the best in the class leader for the boys' side. Koichi Motobuchi, boy number 20, spent late nights studying just to compete. Even in sports, when forced to participate, Kiriyama was better and more graceful than just about any of his peers. The only boys in Shiroi... This word, for some reason, is giving me a lot of trouble. Shiroiwa Junior High could rival him in a serious matchup would be the former ace shortstop Shuya and his basketball team's ace guard Shinji Mimura. In every aspect, Kazuo Kiriyama was the perfect man. But why did this perfect man end up as the leader of hooligans? Shuya couldn't begin to know the answer, though he could perceive in Kiriyama a sense, although tactical, something out of place. Shuya couldn't put his finger on it. Kiriyama never acted out in school, nor would he bully someone as Ryuhei Sasagawa and others sometimes did to Yoshio Akamatsu. But Shuya felt something was lacking, perhaps? Kiriyama frequently skipped at school. The thought was that he would ever actually study was preposterous. When he did show up for class, he just sat there, silent, his mind seemingly somewhere completely different. Without a powerful and meddlesome government insisting upon a compulsory education, Kiriyama might never have attended school at all, or he might have come all the time just because he felt like it. Shuya couldn't guess which. He had thought the boy would certainly pass on the school trip without a second thought, yet here he was. Kiriyama, acting upon another whim then? Shuya was staring off at the lights in the ceiling, thinking about Kiriyama when a sunny voice called his name and pulled him back to reality. From the seat across from the aisle, Noriko Nakagawa, girl number 15, offered something wrapped in cellophane. Aww. Small enough to fit in the palm of her hand, the pouch was packed full with little, light brown, round objects. Cookies, probably. Light from the ceiling glinted along the surface of the clear, stiff wrapping from the sun over water. A neatly tied bow of gold ribbon held it closed. Noriko Nakagawa was in Yuki Utsumi's group of mainstreamers. Shoulder-length hair framed a round and very girlish face, with striking eyes that were gentle and dark, almost black. She was petite, with a playful streak, the picture of an average girl. If anything about her merited special mention, it was her talent with Japanese. Noriko was the best writer in class. As a result, Shuya and Noriko talked relatively often. During break, Shuya would compose song lyrics in the margins of his notebooks, and sometimes Noriko would ask to read them. Noriko usually kept with Yuki and the other girls, but showing up a little late for this trip, she had been forced to take the open seat. Shuya reached for the bag, but stopped, raising the eyebrows in question. Somewhat flustered, Noriko said, my little brother begged me to bake these today. I had these extra, and they're no good stale, so you and Mr. Nobu can have them if you like. Mr. Nobu was Yoshitoki's Konibo's nickname. Despite his good-humored, googling eyes, Yoshitoki could be surprisingly wise and mature. Referring to him as you would an adult seemed appropriate. The girls didn't often use the boys' nicknames, Mr. Nobu included, but Noriko did, and freely. She made it feel natural and never offended anyone by it. This was Noriko. She had this buoyant quality. Shuya never had a nickname, actually. He did have something of a strange one from elementary school after a brand of cigarettes, but like Shinji's the third man moniker, no one ever actually used it when talking with him. But some time ago, he had noticed that Noriko was the only girl that ever called him by his first name. Listening in, Yoshitoki interjected, Really? You mean it? Nice! If you made it, then they must be good. Yoshitoki snatched the bag from Shuya's reach, quickly undid the ribbon, and withdrew and sampled a cookie. Wow, these are amazing! Caught in the middle, Shuya grinned. Could the boy be any more obvious? As soon as Noriko had taken the seat across from Shuya, Yoshitoki had begun acting all weird, sneaking glances at her and straightening his posture. A month and a half earlier, during spring vacation, Shuya and Yoshitoki were fishing for black bass at the city reserve when Yoshitoki had blurted, Hey, Shuya, I kinda got a crush. Oh? Shuya said. Who is it? Nakagawa. From our class? Yeah. Which one? There are two Nakagawas. You mean Yuka? Whatever. You're the one who's into the fat ones, not me. You jerk. You trying to say Kazumi's fat? She's just a little chubby, that's all. Sorry, Yoshitoki said. Anyway, well, it's Noriko. That's so. Well, she's a nice girl. Don't you think so? Right? Yeah. Yoshitoki was utterly transparent. Yet Noriko seemingly remained unaware. Shuya couldn't tell if she was that oblivious or what. Maybe that was just a part of what made her Noriko. Shuya took a cookie from the bag in Yoshitoki's hand and held it up to his eyes. Then he looked at Noriko and asked, You said they're no good stale? Yeah. Noriko Two sharp nods. For some reason, her eyes seemed tense. That's right. Guess you must be confident that they were any good in the first place, then. Shuya had been making a lot of snide remarks lately, perhaps picking it up from Shinji Miyamura. The habit annoyed some, but Noriko giggled and said, That's right. Hey, Yoshitoki said, cutting it again. I said they were amazing, didn't I? You heard me, right, Noriko? Noriko smiled. Thanks, you're so sweet, Mr. Nobu. Yoshitoki suddenly stiffened, as if he had poked his finger into an outlet. Then, without further comment, he stared down at his feet and crunched on a cookie. With another grin, Shuya popped a cookie into his mouth. It was sweet and light. This is good, he said. Noriko hadn't taken her eyes off of him the entire time and said, Thanks. Shuya thought she sounded different when she was thanking him. Maybe he had just imagined it. But no, her eyes were so serious watching him eat that cookie. Were they really left over from ones made from her brother? Or had she made them because she wanted someone in particular to eat them? No, that was just his imagination. Wasn't it? Shuya's mind jumped to Kazumi. She was a grade ahead of him, and until last year, they had been in the music club together. Rock music would never make it into the repertoire of a school in the Republic, but when the music club's advisor, Mrs. Miyata, wasn't around, the band often played rock to kill the time. That's really why the students joined up. The only female saxophone player in the ensemble, Kazumi Shinati, was better than any of the boys at rock sax. She was tall, nearly as tall as Shuya's 170 centimeters. I'm going to need for you to make that into feet. I think that's 170 centimeters. That's like 5'9", 7", whatever. 170 centimeters and a little chubby. But when she had that alto sax in her hands and her hair gathered at the sides of her necks and she got that mature worldwide expression, she was really cool. The sight made Shuya's heart race. And then she taught him difficult guitar chords. I play a little before I started sax, she said. After that, he practiced day and night. Excuse me. Find the page. Oh my god, they're stuck. By the middle of 8th grade, he had become the best in the club, all because he'd wanted Kazumi to hear it. One day after school, Shuya and Kazumi found themselves alone in the music room. He sang and played Summertime Blues for her, and she said, That was incredible, Shuya. Really cool. That night, he bought himself his first can of beer to celebrate. It was delicious, but 3 days later, he told her straight out, I like you. She was as straight with him. Sorry, I have a boyfriend. She graduated and went on to high school with a music program, the same school as her boyfriend. There's more to the story of Shuya and Yoshitoki fishing at the reservoir that spring day. After telling Shuya and Noriko, Yoshitoki asked, Do you still like that older girl? Shuya answered, Yeah, I like her. Probably will for the rest of my life. Yoshitoki looked perplexed. But hey, she's already got someone. Shuya had said, So what? And with an overcast hand sent the silver lure as far as it could go. Shuya grabbed the cookies from Yoshitoki, who was still looking downward, and said, If you eat them all, Noriko won't get any. Oh yeah, sorry. Shuya returned the package to Noriko and said, Sorry about that. Oh no, she said. It's all right. You two eat them. Really? The two of us shouldn't get to have them all. Just then, Shuya noticed who was sitting next to Noriko. Shogo Kawada, boy number 5. His large frame clad in the school's uniform, leaned against the window's glass, arms folded, eyes closed and still. Asleep, maybe. Kawada's hair was cropped so short to be almost non-existent, and his face, vaguely reminiscent of some carnival food vendor, wore a faint layer of stubble. Stubble, everyone! Didn't he look a little old to be in junior high? Ooh. Ooh. Well, actually, that could be explained. Though the same group of students in Class B had been carried over from the 8th grade, Shogo Kawada had transferred in from Kobe only the month before. And whatever due to illness or injury, likely the latter, he hadn't seemed the type prone to illness. He had missed over half a year at school and had been held back. This made him a year older than most of the other class. Though Kawada had never spoken of any of this himself, Shuya had heard it all the same. I love Kawada. And when he had heard was frankly not good. According to rumor, Kawada had been nothing but a thug, and he'd received the injuries from what he had taken him out of school in a fight, scars all over his body seeming to confirm the speculation. One long slash across his left eyebrow came from what appeared to be a blade. And in the locker room, Shuya had shivered when he saw the scars on the youth's arms and back. As an aside, Kawada's muscular body, reminiscent of a middleweight boxer's, impressed even Shuya. What are you looking at, Shuya? Get your eyes, cast them elsewhere. On his left shoulder were two particularly round marks, one right next to the other, just like gunshot wounds, as impossible as that would be. These rumors came paired with another, shared by whispers. Someday, Kawada and Kiriyama are going to fight. Just after Kawada transferred in, Ryuhei Sasagawa, reckless and posturing, got in the new student's face. What went down and how it ended were only hearsay, but Ryuhei came back looking pale and ran crying to Kiriyama, who gave no response save for a disinterested glance. At least so far, the two would-be rivals had not yet given any impression that anything serious was going to happen. Kiriyama didn't appear to have any interest in Kawada, and the feeling seemed mutual. Thanks to that, Class B remained at peace, happily ever after. In any event, between the age difference and the rumors, the other students would avoid Kawada. But Shuya didn't like to judge people from rumors. Someone once said, "If you can see it with your own eyes, you don't need to listen to the words of others." Shuya looked to Noriko and gestured to Kawada with his chin. "Is he asleep?" She said and glanced over her shoulder. "Yeah, I didn't want to wake him." "He doesn't seem to be like the kind of guy who eats cookies anyway." Noriko giggled, and just as Shuya began to crack a smile, the voice came. "I'm fine." "Oh?" Shuya again looked at Kawada. The firm, deep voice lingered in Shuya's ears, unfamiliar but evidently belonging to Kawada. He must have been awake, though his eyes remained closed. Shuya realized he'd almost never heard him speak, despite the new student having transferred in over a month ago. Noriko glanced again at Kawada, then back at Shuya, who shrugged and stuffed another cookie into his mouth. After that, he and Noriko and Yoshitoki went back on talking, or so he thought. Whoop! It was just before 10 when Shuya noticed something was off. Something felt wrong inside the bus. In the seat to his left, Yoshitoki's breathing softly, asleep. Shinji Mimura's body was slumped over, dangling into the aisle. Noriko Nakagawa's eyes were closed. No one was talking. Everyone seemed to have fallen asleep. Of course, it was past bedtime for kids who really cared about being healthy, but with the excitement of having just left for their school trip, wasn't it a bit early for everyone to be sleeping? They should all be singing. Wasn't this bus equipped with one of those hateful, vulgar karaoke machines? Worst of all, Shuya himself felt incredibly tired. In this stupor, he tried to look around, but his head felt too heavy, flopped against the backrest. His vision swam, and the shadowy front of the confined cabin in the windshield mirror, Shuya saw the bus driver reflected in the miniature. A mask covered the driver's mouth, with some hose-like object trailing down to a thin strap hooked around his ears. What was it? Aside from the hose hanging downward, it looked like just one of those emergency oxygen masks from an airplane. Was the air inside of the bus unbreathable? "Ladies and gentlemen, the bus will be making an emergency landing due to the engine trouble. Please fasten your seatbelts, put on your oxygen mask, and listen for the flight attendant's instructions." Yeah, right. A scratching noise came from the right, and Shuya, with considerable effort, inclined his head in that direction. His body felt heavy, like he was moving through jelly. Shogo Kawada had lifted himself from the seat and was trying to open the window, but whether it was rusted shut or had a broken lock, the window would not budge. Kawada began to pound on the glass with his left hand, trying to break it. Why? But the window didn't break. Kawada attempted to strike it one more time, but his arm lost all of its strength and fell slack. He slumped back into the seat. Shuya thought he could faintly hear the low voice say, "Damn," and then Shuya slept. Around the same time, the children's families back in Shiroiwa were visited by men in black sedans. They're always black sedans. Do they get, like, a group discount? What the fuck is going on with those sedans? Sorry, that's just my own personal rant there. The parents must have all been equally speechless, called to their doors in the middle of the night and presented with the government document stamped with the peach emblem. Nearly all would silently nod and think of the children they would likely never see again. But some would lash out, only to be beaten unconscious with a single blow of a tactical baton. Or, if they were unlucky, showered in a stream of hot lead spat out by submachine guns and taken from this world just as a little ahead of their beloved young. Oh! The bus for the Shiroi Junior High ninth grade Class B had long since peeled off from the school trip caravan and turned towards Takamatsu City. It entered the city, wound through the local streets, then stopped its engine fading to silence. The driver was in his 40s, a good-natured looking fellow with salt and pepper hair. The oxygen mask still strapped to his slightly haggard face, he looked back at the students of Class B with a hint of sadness in his eyes. But when a man arrived outside the windows, the driver's expression cleared. He gave the Republic's distinct salute and pushed the switch to open the door. As the men in military uniforms and gas masks swarmed inside, the drivers gazed off into the distance. Beneath the moonlight and beyond the bone-white concrete pier, the ship that would carry the players swarmed atop. That was the jet-black sea. 42 students remained. What time is it? All right, so that was chapter 0. So, let's see. How many pages is the first chapter? I'm kind of not tired. Oh, the first couple of chapters are like no. I'm gonna keep going for. There's like a couple. The first couple of chapters are like no pages. I'm gonna keep going for a little bit. So excuse my longness. Actually, I'm gonna take a drink of my beverage first. Hold on a second. Apologies. My voice is awful. All right, so this is chapter 1 now. First of all, and also just as an aside, I love the way this is written, by the way. There are very few books that I can actually read because of the way that they're written. I don't like the way that the narrator writes things, like, but the way that this is written is awesome. Like, it's just very easy to read, and I love Shuya. The end. Okay, so chapter 1, page 35. For a brief moment, For a brief moment, Shuya found himself in the familiar surroundings of his classroom. Of course, the classroom wasn't that of the ninth grade Class B, though it did have the teacher's podium and lectern, washed out blackboard, large screen TV, elevated. Okay, pause. Who has a large screen TV in their classroom? I am going to show my age here, but this was also in 1997. So I want to know who had a large screen TV in their classroom in 1997. In 1997, when I was in school, if I had it in the classroom, if it wasn't rolled in on one of those fucking carts, if we had a TV in the classroom, it was one of those like small TVs that was like huge, and it had like the bulbs, or not bulbs, but you know those little oh my god, what the fuck were they called? Not light bulbs, but like tubes. It was like a tube TV, and they were in the corner, and they were like strapped to the corner of your classroom, and you were always like, "That's gonna fall one day, and it's gonna fall on me because I'm unlucky." It was always like strapped to the corner of the top of the room. Yeah, that's how that was. So I don't know who has a large screen TV back in 1997, but okay, these people were rich, I guess. Not my school. Like I said, we had it on a cart. And when that was rolled in on the cart, you knew it was going to be a good day because you were watching Bill Nye the Science Guy. Sorry, insert over. Sorry, excuse me. Large screen TV elevated on a stand to the left, and rows of desks and chairs of plywood and steel. On the corner of the desk where Shuya sat, someone had used a metal tool to carve anti-government graffiti. The leader is hot for women in uniform. Together on the bus until only moments ago, at least as far as he could tell. All 42 students were seated at the desks, the boys in their standing collar button-up jackets and the girls in their sailor fuku, but asleep slumped haphazardly onto their desks or back in their chairs. Seated beside the frosted glass windows on the hallway side of the room, assuming this place had the same layout as his own school, Shuya surveyed his surroundings. None of the other students appeared to be awake. To the left, and a little forward, near the center of the room, was Yoshitoki Kuninobu and Noriko Nakigawa. Behind, and Shinji Mimura on his left, each of them deep asleep on their desks. Lady Hiroki Sugimura had been deposited at the desk next to the exterior window at the room's left. Pause again. I know that he is like the narrator of this story, but Shuya was the last one to fall asleep, and now he's the first one to fall asleep. Does he just have like a really good system? Like he's just immune to this gas or whatever it was that like this knockout gas. Shuya just has a really good immune system. So well done for Shuya's immune system. Let's give it a clap. Unpause. Shuya came to the belated realization that everyone had been placed in the same assigned seating of their class in Shiroiwa Junior High. Then he noticed what he had been feeling off about the room. The windows in Hiroki's side were covered with black panels, slate, steel plates perhaps. Dingy light from rows of ceiling fluorescents reflected coldly off the panel surfaces. The frosted glass windows near Shuya were also submerged in darkness, possibly covered from the hallway side. Shuya couldn't tell what time of day it was. He looked at his watch, exactly 1 o'clock. Morning or afternoon? The date read Thursday, 22. If his watch hadn't been tampered with, either 3 hours had passed since that particular exhaustion overcame him in the bus, or this was the afternoon of the next day. Okay, no point on dwelling on it. Shuya looked around at his classmates. Something was strange. Well, everything about this was strange, yet something was wrong. Shuya quickly recognized what it was. Noriko was slumped on her desk, and just above the sailor collar of her uniform, a metallic silver band snugly encircled her neck. Barely visible at the edge of Yoshitoki Koninobu's buttoned collar was a matching object, and Shinji Mimura, Hiroki Sugimura, and every one of his classmates all had one around their necks. Struck with the sudden realization, Shuya touched the right hand to the back of his neck. He felt something hard and cold. There was no doubting it. He had one too. He gave the object a little tug, but firmly in place, it refused to come off. Now that it had become conscious of the band, he felt like he was suffocating. A collar. A goddamn collar! I'm no dog! She fidgeted with the thing for a time before giving up. And what had happened to the school trip? She had noticed his gym bag lying at his feet. The night before, he'd stuffed it with clothes and a towel, a travel notebook handed out by his school, as well as a flask of bourbon and whatever else he thought he would need. Everyone else's bags were beside them as well. Suddenly, the sliding door at the front of the class clattered open. Shuya looked towards the entrance. A man entered the room. He was alone. He was well built, though a little on the short side, with unsized legs that seemed only an afterthought to his torso. Well, he wore plain light beige slacks, a gray suit coat, a crimson tie, and black loafers, all of them shabby. A peach-colored pin on his collar identified him as a government official. He had rosy cheeks. But what stood out the most was his hair, straightened down to his shoulders in a style popular with younger women. She was reminded of the grainy photocopy cover of a Joan Baez cassette he'd chopped off the black market. The man stepped onto the teacher's podium and surveyed the class. His eyes landed on Shuya, the only student awake. Unless this was all a dream. The two stared at each other for at least 1 full minute, but as the other students began to stir and the sounds of uneasy breathing grew, the man looked away. Some of the students called out to wake up the others who were more deeply asleep. Shia looked around the classroom. The other kids had started to awaken, their eyes yet unfocused, and with no idea of what was happening. Yoshitoki Koninobu turned in his chair and met Shuya's gaze. Shuya pointed to his own collar and tilted his head to the side. Yoshitoki's hands scrambled for his neck and shocking sprang to his expression. Then, for some reason, Yoshitoki shook his head several times, finally looking to the front of the class. Noriko Nakagawa also gazed at Shuya, her eyes distant, but Shuya could only offer a shrug in response. Finally, when everyone was awake, the man spoke, his voice cheery. All right, is everyone awake? Did you sleep well? No one said anything in reply. Not even the two class clowns, Yutaka Sato and Yuka Nakagawa, girl number 16. 42 students remained. Chapter 2. The long-haired man at the teacher's lectern continued with a broad smile. All right, all right, all right. Okay, I'll explain. First off, my name is Kinpatsu Sakamochi, and I am your new instructor. The man who had called himself Sakamochi turned to the blackboard and wrote his name in large vertical characters with the chalk, a riff on the name of a teacher on a long-running TV series. What kind of stupid name was that? An alias, maybe given the situation. The class leader for the girls, Yuki Utsumi, stood suddenly and said, "I don't understand." All eyes turned to her. Yuki's long hair parted into two neat braids. Her expression was a little tense, but her voice was firm. Maybe she'd imagined up some scenario, impossible as it seemed, that had brought the students here, like they'd all been knocked unconscious in a bus accident. "What's going on?" Yuki asked. "We just left on our school trip. Isn't that right, everyone?" Yuki looked over her shoulders to her classmates all around. Her question had triggered an outburst, and nearly everyone was shouting over each other. "Where are we? Did you fall asleep too? Hey, what time is it? Was everyone sleeping? Shit, I don't have a watch. Do you remember getting off of the bus and coming here? Who the hell is that guy?" "No, I don't remember anything. I don't like this. What's going on? I'm scared." Shuya noticed that Sakimochi had stopped his speech to listen. Silent himself, Shuya watched his classmates. A few were keeping quiet. The first to catch his notice was Kazuo Kiriyama, a little behind him and to the side at the middle of the back row. Beneath his slicked back hair, Kiriyama's calm eyes were fixed on the man at the podium, watching, not glaring. His eyes were far too placid to call it that. Despite their attempts to get him to say something, Kiriyama paid no attention to the lackeys seated around him. Ryuhei Sasagawa and Mitsura Numai, Hiroshi Koronaga, boy number 9, and Sho Tsukioka, boy number 14. Then there was Mitsuko Soma, second seat from the front on the window row. You remember that vaguely rough around the edges girl? Her desk was separated from the other two in her clique, Hirono Shimizu and Yoshimi Yahagi. And none of the other girls, or boys for that matter, tried to talk to her. Hirono and Yoshimi were in adjacent seats to Shuya's left, and they were saying something to each other. Mitsuyo had the captivating face of a pop idol, though it wore its usually vague, listless expression. Arms folded, she stared at Sakamochi. Hiroki Sugimura sat directly behind her and was talking with Tadakatsu Hatagami to his right. Next was Shogo Kawada in the same window row, 2 seats from the back. He too silently stared at Sakamochi as Shuya watched. Kawada took a piece of gum from his pocket and started to chew. His eyes fixed dead ahead and his jaw worked up and down. Shuya faced the front of the class and noticed Noriko was still staring back at him, her dark eyes trembling in fear. Shuya glanced at Yoshitoki in the seat ahead of her, but he was talking about something. God damn it. With Shinji Mimura in the next row. Quickly returning his eyes to Noriko, Shuya attempted a tiny nod. A little relief etched into her eyes. Sakamochi clapped his hands a few times and admonished, all right. Quiet down, everyone." The uproar quickly subsided and he continued, "Okay, I'll explain. We've had you come here for one and only one reason. Then, today, you're all going to kill each other." This time, no outburst came. The students froze like subjects of a still life photograph, except Kawada. Shuya noticed who kept on the chewing gum. Kawada's expression remained impassive, though Shuya thought he might have seen the flash of a faint smile. Sakamochi maintained his broad grin and continued, "Your class has been chosen for this year's program." Someone whimpered. 42 students remained. Chapter 3. Every junior high student in the Republic of the Greater East Asia knew about the program, which was covered in textbooks starting in the 4th grade. A somewhat detailed description appeared in the government-compiled Republic of Greater East Asia Compact Encyclopedia. Program: a written list providing details of items or performers, names, order of appearance, etc. Number 4. A battle simulation necessary to our defense and conduct by our nation's ground non-aggressive force, officially titled Combat Experiment 68th Program, first held in 1947. The annual simulations are conducted by 50 ninth grade classes selected voluntarily nationwide. Prior to 1950, the number of classes was 47, with various statistics collected from the trials. The experiment itself is simple. The students in each class fight each other until only one remains, and the findings include the elapsed time of the simulation are determined. The last survivor, winner, in each class is awarded a lifetime pension and a personal signed autograph from His Majesty the Leader. The 317th leader's famous April speech was given in response to protesters and agitators from the extremist sect during the first year of the program. The April speech appears in the 7th grade textbooks as followed. My beloved comrades who strive towards revolution and development. 2 minutes interruption for applause and cheers for the great 317th leader. Comrades! 1 minute interruption. Throughout the world, shameless imperialists who seek the menace of our republic still continue to assemble. Observe what they do to their own countrymen. They exploit them, they cheat them, they brainwash them, the people who would otherwise have been our comrades, into becoming the advanced guard of their imperialism, and then they use them at their whim. Unanimous cry of righteous indignation. Given the slightest chance, the imperialists would invade the soil of our republic, the most advanced revolutionary state in the world. By weaving their plot to bring ruin to our people, they lay bare the depths of their devious ways. Scattered shouts of anger. With our nation surrounded by this state of affairs, the 68th program is absolutely vital. In truth, I myself will be unable to hold back my bitter tears of remorse over the loss of the lives of thousands, even tens of thousands, each of the age of only 15, but in their lives serves to protect the independence of our people living in this nation of abundance. Then will not their flesh and blood live on for eternity, becoming one with this land of beauty passed down to us by our gods? 1 minute interruption for a wave of applause and cheers. As you all know, we do not have a military draft in the Republic. The ground, maritime, and non-aggressive air forces consist of young volunteer soldiers who aspire to patriotism and burn with the resilience and purpose of revolution and development. They risk their lives day and night on the front lines. Think of the program as a kind of draft, one unique to our nation, to defend our nation. Enough of that windbag. Middle-aged, non-aggressive forces recruiters could be often found right outside train stations saying, "How about we got sick of some pork and rice?" as their standard bait. Shuya had heard about the program before he was even in 4th grade. It was after his parents died in a traffic accident, and he had just begun to adjust to the life in the house of mercy and love, where an acquaintance to his father had put him. None of his relatives would take him. Some said it was because his parents had been involved in anti-government activities, but he'd never been confirmed of the story. Shuya must have been 5 at the time, watching TV in the rec room with Yoshitoki Kuninobu, and had already been well established at the House of Mercy and Love when he showed up. The latest episode of Shuya's favorite giant mecha anime had just ended, and the director of the facility, Miss Ryoko Ono, changed the channel. The daughter of the previous director at the time, she was probably still in high school. Regardless, the kids used honorifics with her as the workers there, and Miss Ono was no exception. Shuya kept on watching the screen, where an adult man in a stiff suit had walked into the camera. The child recognized that this must be the news thing, that the boring show that was on all the channels from time to time. The man was reading from a script. Shuya couldn't remember what the newscaster had said, but it was pretty much always the same. It was probably something like, "We have received confirmation from officials with the government and the non-aggressive forces that the program run in Kagawa Prefecture for the first time in 3 years completed yesterday at 3:12 p.m. The participating class from Zent Suji 4th Junior High 9th grade class E of the city of Zents Suji. The program took place at the previously undisclosed location of Shidaka Island, 4 kilometers off the coast from the town of Todotsu. 3 days, 7 hours, and 43 minutes elapsed before the winner was determined. Earlier today, the bodies were retrieved and autopsies were held to determine the preliminary causes of death for the 38 deceased. Students as followed: 17 by gunshot, 9 by edged weapon, 5 by blunt object, 3 by suffocation. Suffocation, Jesus. The newscaster displayed the apparent winner, a young girl in a tattered sailor suit uniform, flanked by 2 soldiers, her face twitching as she looked into the camera. At the edge of her long, disheveled hair, and her right temple was smeared dark red. But something peculiar about the image would remain fresh in Shuya's memory, the corner of the girl's mouth working in contorted flashes that looked like a smile. Shuya recognized now that this was the first time he had witnessed the face of insanity. But at the time he hadn't distinguished it as such. He simply felt afraid, as if he were looking at a monster. She believed he had asked, "Miss Ano, what is that?" Miss Ano shook her head and said, "It's nothing." Then she looked away from Shuya and whispered, "That poor girl." Yoshitoki Koninobu, preoccupied with his tangerine, hadn't been paying attention to the TV for some time. As Shuya grew older, the local news reports coming roughly twice a year with no schedule and no warning felt increasingly ominous. With 59 ninth grade classes around the country and assuming 40 students in each, it was a death sentence visited annually upon 2,000 children. No, 1,950 to be precise. And this was no mere killing, but familiar classmates murdering each other in competition for a single survivor's throne, like the most heinous game of musical chairs. But there was no resisting it. The actions of the government of the Republic of Greater East Asia was not to be defied. So she viewed the program with dismissive contempt. That was how most of the kids in the ninth grade reserves dealt with it. Okay, sure, a kind of draft unique to our nation of abundance and land of beauty. How many junior high students were there in the Republic? Even with the declining birth rate, the odds weren't even 1 in 800 or so. In all of the Kagawa prefecture, at most, only one class wins that lottery in 2 years. Frankly, getting killed in a car accident was just as likely, and seeing as how he had never got the luck in the draw, she had never thought he'd get chosen. Hell, when the local shopping arcade held a raffle, he never won more than a box of tissues, so who gives a shit? Fuck it. But every once in a while, someone in his class, usually one of the girls, would cry and say, "My cousin's in the program," or something like that, and she is inside she that black terror would return, and with it anger. Who had the right to make that cute girl sad? But then, after days of depression, the girl would regain her smile again, and Shuya's feelings of terror and anger would gradually fade away. Only the faint, indistinct sense of helplessness and distrust towards the government would remain behind. That's how it went. And when Shuya entered the ninth grade this year, he and likely his classmates believed Class B alone would be safe. They had to believe, until this very moment. A chair noisily scraped against the floor as one of the boys stood up and shouted, his voice shrill. That can't be! She had turned to the source of the outburst, somewhere behind Hiroki Sugimura. It was the class leader for the boys, Kiyoichi Motobuchi. Kiyoichi. Kiyoichi's face had crossed from pale into ashen in the surreal contrast with the silver rimmed glasses. He could have been one of Andy Warhol's silken creations from their art textbook, Decadent Art of the American Empire. Some in the class may have hoped Kiyoichi would offer some rational argument. Kill the kids who were our friends just the day before? That's impossible. This has to be a mistake. Hey, explain this to the class. Explain this to the jerk class leader. But what Kiyoichi said was utterly worthless. My father is the director of the Kagawa Department of National Resources. Kiyoichi was trembling, and his voice sounded even more nervous than it usually did. There's no way that my class would be selected for the program. The man who had called himself Sakamochi shook his head with a dry smile. His hair billowed. You're Motobuchi, yeah? Sakamochi said, his voice syrupy. Surely you know of the concept of equality, right? Listen, all people are born equal. Just because your father is a government official doesn't mean it's all right for him to receive special treatment. Clearly the same goes for his son. Listen, everyone, you all have your own circumstances. Some of you come from rich families and some poor. But your value isn't determined by such things, by things beyond your control. Each one of you must discover your own worth through your own efforts. So, Motobuchi, don't make the mistake of thinking that you alone are special, because you're not. Stunned to silence, Kiyoichi slumped to his chair. Sakamochi glared at the boy for a time until his broad grin suddenly returned. They'll be talking about you on the morning news, Sakamochi said. Of course, with the program being a secret experiment, they won't announce any of the details until it's over. But, well, your fathers and mothers have all been informed. Everyone appeared stunned. We have to kill our classmates? Can it really be? What? Sakamochi said, scratching his head in apparent consternation. You still don't believe me? He faced the doorway and called out, taking time with his words. You men, come on in. One command, 3 soldiers noisily rushed into the room, their dress, a camouflage combat uniform, combat boots, and a metal helmet with the peach emblazoned, with the peach emblem, emblazoned, that's a weird word, on the front, identified the men as a member of the non-aggressive forces. They carried assault rifles slung from their shoulders and wore belt holsters with pistol grips visible. One was tall, with tousled hair, odd for a soldier. That and his default expression seemed to be an insincere smile. Another was of average height and baby-faced, a leading man type. The last seemed a touch effeminate, with fairly unimpressive compared to the other 2. The 3 men were stooped over, hauling a large sack made of heavy plastic. Oh. It resembled a black sleeping bag, only it bulged here and there, and it stuffed as if stuffed with pineapples. Why pineapples, of all things? Sakamochi stepped aside to the window, and the 3 soldiers placed the bag atop the teacher's podium. The end of the bag hung off the edges of the platform. Whatever was inside must not have been very rigid, because the ends, especially the sides facing the windows, drooped. Sakamochi said, "These men will be assisting with your program. Allow me to introduce them. This is Mr. Tahara, Mr. Kondo, and Mr. Nomura. All right, show them what's inside the bag." The insincere soldier called Tahara, grabbed the zipper on the hallway side, and tugged it open. A red liquid covered the interior. With the zipper only partway open, one of the girls in the front row screamed. Others quickly joined in, the soprano chorus swelling over a backdrop of confused exclamations and clattering desks and chairs. Shiya gulped. Then he saw it. Inside the half-open bag, the teacher in charge of Class B, Mr. Hayashida. No, the former teacher. No, the former Mr. Hayashida. His cheap, blue-gray suit was soaked in blood. Only the left half of his black-rimmed glasses, the source of his nickname, Dragonfly, remained. Unsurprisingly, given that only the left half of his head was still there. Behind the single lens, the red marble of an eye stared languidly at the ceiling. What was left of his hair was mottled with a gray jelly that must have been brain matter. His left arm, watch still on, spilled out of the bag, as if relieved to be free of the confines, and dangled off the front of the podium. Anyone in the front row would have been close enough to see if the watch's second hand was still moving. All right, all right, all right. Quiet, quiet. Sakamochi clapped his hands, but the girl's shrieks persisted. Quiet, please! Really, you all... Suddenly, Kondo, the baby-faced soldier, drew his sidearm. Shia thought the soldier was going to fire a warning shot at the ceiling, but instead, Kondo seized the body bag with his free hand and dragged it off the platform. Then he lifted Mr. Hayashida's body so that the teacher's head was level with his own. He looked like a hero in some sci-fi monster movie battling a giant cocoon spinning worm. The soldier put his gun to Mr. Hayashida's head and squeezed the trigger twice. The teacher's head blew apart, inside spraying out the energy of the high velocity, round, scattering bits of brains and bone in a bloody mist that fell upon the faces and chests of the students in the front row. When echoes of gunfire subsided, Mr. Hayashida didn't have much of a head left at all. The soldier tossed Mr. Hayashida's body beside the podium. The screams had stopped. 42 students remained. Let me see. You know what? We will go one more chapter, because I think I know what's at the end of that, and I think that'll be fun to end on. All right, so chapter 4. Let's see where my time is. Yeah, it's fine. We'll go one more. And again, I apologize for my terrible voice, but I don't really think anyone's going to watch me anyway. This is just for me to practice my nonsense. And if anybody does want to watch me, then awesome. But I apologize for my nonsense. Chapter 4. The standing students fearfully lowered themselves back into their seats. The unimpressive soldier on the end dragged Mr. Hayashida's body bag to the corner of the room, then rejoined his two comrades beside the teacher's podium. Sakamochi returned to the lectern. The room was silent again, save for the sounds of one student somewhere near the back, miserable moaning punctured by splashes of vomit spilling wetly on the floor. I mean, the smell came soon after. All right, Sakamochi said, calmly smoothing back his hair. Mr. Hayashida was, you see, very opposed to your selection for the program. Well, this all happened so suddenly. I feel bad about it myself. The students had gone still. They had accepted reality. This was not a joke. They were going to be forced to kill each other. But now, finally, she had desperately made himself think. His mind, dazed when confronted with the impossibility of the scenario, had been awakened by the ghastly sight of Mr. Hayashida's corpse and the cruel performance in which it had featured. I have to escape, whatever it takes. But how? Right. First, I need to talk to Yoshitoki, and Miyamura, and Sugimura. But how exactly does the program go anyway? The details haven't ever been made public. I know we're given weapons to kill each other with, but are we allowed to talk? How does the government monitor what happens? I, said a voice, interrupting Shia's thoughts. He raised his head and opened his eyes. Yoshitoki Koninobu half stood, blankly staring at Sakamochi, unsure if he should finish what it was he was about to say. As if the words had spilled out of their own accord, Shuya's body tensed. Yoshitoki, keep quiet! Sakamochi offered a warm smile and said, Yes, what is it? Ask me anything. On automatic pilot, without even thinking, Yoshitoki continued, I don't have parents. Who did you contact? Ah, yes. Sakamochi nodded. There was a student living in a welfare institution. You're Nanahara then. The student record said you had ideological problems, and I'm Nanahara. Interrupted. Oh, sorry. I'm Nanahara. Shuya interrupted, half shouting. Sakamochi glanced at Shuya, then looking back at Yoshitoki. Yoshitoki looked at Shuya too, still something vacant in his expression. Oh, sorry. Sakamochi said. There was another. You must be Koninobu. Right. I made sure to contact the administrator of the facility where both of you live. She was rather pretty. Sakamochi grinned at the implications he had seen her personally. As utterly cheerful as the smile was, there was something nasty to it. Shuya grimaced. Did something happen to Misano? She was like Mr. Hayashida, Nanahara. She resisted on your behalf. To make her obedient, well... Sakamochi paused before calmly continuing. I had to force myself upon her. Now don't you worry, she's not dead or anything. A crimson rage sprung up inside Shuya, but before he could say anything, he heard Yoshitoki yell, I'll kill you! Yoshitoki stood. His face had changed with a heartfelt anger rarely displayed by the typical genial boy. His classmates had likely never seen him like this before, nor would they ever have imagined him generally capable of the emotion, though Shuya, having lived together with his friend for so many years, had encountered that expression maybe a couple of times. Once was in the 4th grade when a hit-and-run driver struck the orphanage's dog, Eddie, outside the front gates, and Yoshitoki chased after him. The second time had been just a year ago. The man had been using the House of Mercy and Love's debts as an excuse to make dodged advances at Miss Ano. When she finally scraped together the money and rejected him once and for all, he deliberately cursed her out where the children would hear. If she hadn't stopped him, Yoshitoki would have knocked him his front teeth out, whatever the cost. Yoshitoki was incredibly kind and could laugh off most any offense, whether it was being made fun of or being pushed around, but hurt somebody he loved, and his response would be ferocious. Shuya admired that. I'll kill you, you bastard! Yoshitoki went on shouting. I'm going to fucking kill you and bury you in shit! Oh? Sakamochi said, flashing an amused smile. Do you really mean what you're saying, Koninobu? Listen, people have to take responsibility for the things that they say. Fuck you! I'm really going to kill you, and don't you fucking forget it! Shuya yelled, Yoshitoki! Let it go! But Yoshitoki didn't seem to hear. Sakamochi spoke again, this time in a soothing yet oddly gleeful tone. You know, Koninobu, what you're saying right now, that's in defiance of the government. I'll kill you! Yoshitoki didn't relent an inch. I'll kill you! Kill you! Kill you! Just as Shuya lost his patience and was about to shout again, Sakamochi shook his head, then turned to the 3 soldiers standing behind the podium and made a sharp gesture. The 3 camouflaged men, Takaharu, Kondo, and Nomura, extended their right arms in unison like the 4 freshmen of some other vocal group, striking an impassioned pose for a song's climax. Though this ensemble happened to be holding pistols. If this were the chorus, it might go, baby, please, spend the night with me. From his seat diagonally behind, she could see Yoshitoki, googling eyes bulging open even wider. The 3 guns flashed simultaneously. Halfway into the aisle, Yoshitoki's body danced the boogaloo. It was over before anyone, including Noriko Nakagawa, directly behind, could duck. And as the gunfire echoes faded, Yoshitoki slowly leaned to the right, then flopped to the floor between his own desk and that of Izumi Kanai. To his right, Izumi gasped. The trio held their pose, arms outstretched and level. 3 identical wisps of smoke wafted from the muzzles of their pistol. The room was oddly silent. Between the desk legs, Shuya saw his friend's familiar face pointed straight at him, those googling eyes open, staring at a point on the floor. A pool of bright blood began to spread. Yoshitoki's arms splayed at his side, began to spasm, shaking from the shoulder down to his fingertips. Yoshitoki! Shoya stood and began to run to Yoshitoki's side, but Noriko got there first. She cried, Mr. Nobu! And stooped over him. The soldier with the fake smile was the only one to shoot her. She fell forward as if she had tripped and slammed atop Yoshitoki's convulsing body. The man immediately pointed his weapon at Shuya. Becoming more and more confused, Shuya froze in place, moving only his eyes. He looked at Noriko. She was on her hands and knees atop Yoshitoki, blood gushing from a wound on her right calf. To Noriko, Sakimochi said, leaving your desk without permission is not allowed. And to Shuya, the same applies to you, Nanahara. Take your seat. Shuya tore his eyes from the sight of Noriko's rapidly bloodying leg and from Yoshitoki beneath her and looked Sakamochi straight in the eye. He could feel his neck muscles twitching from the shock. What the hell is going on? Shuya shouted, on the verge of crying, unable to make himself move. The insincere soldier kept his pistol trained right between Shuya's eyes. What the hell are you doing? You have to... Yoshitoki needs first aid and Noriko! Sakamochi frowned and shook his head. Then he repeated, take your seat now! And to you, Nakagawa. Noriko, her face pale from the sight of Yoshitoki, slowly lifted her head to look at Sakamochi, anger overshadowing what must have been incredible pain. She glared at Sakamochi and said, clipped each word, please, help Konobu. Yoshitoki's right arm continued to spasm, but as Shuya watched, the movements were quickly abating. Without immediate attention, his wounds would clearly be fatal. With a sigh, Sakamochi turned to the insincere soldier and said, Tahara, make sure of it. Before Shuya had time to think of what, the soldier aimed his pistol and fired once. Yoshitoki, Koninobu's head jolted, and something sprayed out and splashed onto Noriko's face. Noriko was dazed, her mouth agape, dark red flecking her face. Shuya realized his own mouth was hanging open, though part of his head was now gone. Yoshitoki kept on staring at the same spot on the floor. But he had stopped spasming. He had stopped doing anything at all. Look, Sakamochi said. He was dead already. Now, if you've seen enough, take your seats. Noriko looked down at Yoshitoki's snarled head. Oh, she let out. This. Shuya was still in shock. His eyes were locked on Yoshitoki's face, glimpsed between the desk legs. He looked, and his thoughts were paralyzed, as if it were his brains that had been blown out. His mind whirled in a tornado of memories, of time spent with Yoshitoki, little adventures of camping and rowing down river, rainy days engrossed in old, well-worn board games, watching a copy of American movies that had been made its way into the black market. The Blues Brothers. Amazingly, the film had even been dubbed in Japanese, though the voice actors were terrible. The two lead characters had been in an orphanage, and for a time, Shuya and Yoshitoki played pretend, Jake and Elwood. Then he remembered the expression on Yoshitoki's face not so long ago when he had said, Hey Shuya, I kinda got a crush, and after that, can't you two hear me? Sakamochi said, or perhaps repeated, as Shuya might have in fact not heard. He just stared at his friend's face, as did Noriko. If they had continued like that, the two may have soon followed after Yoshitoki Koninobu. Besides Sakamochi, the insincere soldier was pointing his gun at Noriko, and the two soldiers pointed theirs at Shuya. But a calm, carefree voice, even saying, Teacher, 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 brought Shuya back to reality, or at least made him turn dimly to the face of the voice's source. On the other side of Yoshitoki's now empty chair, Shinji Miyamura had raised his hand. Noriko finally looked his way. Miyamura, right? Sakamochi said, What is it? Shinji lowered his hand, and the third man's voice suddenly sounded no different than any other day when he said, Since Nakagawa is hurt, could I help her to her chair? Sakamochi's eyebrows rose a little, but he nodded his consent. Sure, go ahead. I want to keep things moving. Shinji nodded, stood, and walked to Noriko's side, kneeling between Yoshitoki's body and her. And as he moved, he had taken a neatly folded handkerchief from his pocket, which he then used to wipe Yoshitoki's blood from her face. Noriko didn't react. Come, Nakagawa, stand, he said, taking her by her right arm and helping her up. Then, with his back turned to Sakamochi, Shinji looked at Shuya, who was still half standing at his desk. Beneath crisp, upturned eyebrows, Shinji's typically good-humored eyes had turned solemn, with an arching of an eyebrow and minute shake of his head, he jerked his left hand down, palm open. When Shuya didn't understand, Shinji repeated the gesture. The second time, Shuya realized through the daze that Shinji was telling him, settle down. He returned Shinji's gesture and eased back to his chair. Shinji gave him a slight nod and helped Noriko to her seat, then turned back again and returned to his own. Noriko's right leg dangled from her chair, blood gushing from the wound, staining her white sock and sneaker in bright red, like she had put on one of Santa's boots. Finally, regaining her senses, Noriko started to thank Shinji, but as if he could see behind himself, the boy dismissed her with a shrug. She withdrew, and her eyes fell back down to Yoshitoki, lying just next to her. Her gaze froze there, and though she didn't make a sound, she could see her eyes filling with tears. He, too, looked at Yoshitoki's corpse, the legs of the desks fragmenting the view. A corpse. That's all it was now. There was no denying it. Though unable to fully process what had just occurred, she knew this was a corpse. The corpse of a boy with whom he had shared the last 10 years of his life. And he looked into Yoshitoki's gaping eyes. Anger came to him, pulsing, building steadily, resolute, taking control of his body. He thought he might be shaking. Emotions quelled by shock returning to him. His lip curled as he turned to face Sakamochi, the man watching him with amusement. I'll never forgive you, Shiya thought. I'm going to kill that bastard. Shiya was only moments away from exploding as his friends had done, but then he remembered Shinji's gesture message. Settle down. An outburst now would only bring him the same fate as Yoshitoki, and Yoshitoki's crush, Noriko Nakagawa, was badly hurt. If Shuya died, what would happen to her? With effort, he broke away from Sakamochi's gaze and buried his eyes in the top of the desk. He felt miserable. Denied an outlet, the rage and sorrow threatened to crush his spirit. Sakamochi chuckled, apparently turning his attention elsewhere. To keep his body from trembling, Shuya clenched his fist under the desk. Strongly, he clenched. But with Yoshitoki's body so near, forcing down his emotions was not easy. He really couldn't process it. Can it really be? Can you lose someone just like that? Someone that close? Gone? The two boys had always been together. What they had done together may not have amounted to much, but when they had been playing in the river and Yoshitoki nearly drowned, she was the one who saved him. When they were collecting grasshoppers and carelessly stuffed too many in a single box, killing nearly all of them, they both felt really bad about it. Then they fought over Eddie, the dog. Who did he love more? When they snuck into the attic over the school's faculty room for a laugh and it looked like they were about to be caught, they pulled off the escape and laughed about it together. The two really had been inseparable. They had been. And now he's gone? Shinji raised his hand. Teacher, I have another question. Again, Miyamura? What is it? Nakagawa's hurt. Wouldn't her being in the program make it unfair? Sakamochi laughed in amusement. Yeah? Well, that may be true, Miyamura, but what of it? Couldn't you see her wound get treated and have the program postponed until she's healed? Shuya, having barely been able to control his tumultuous, whatever that word is, emotions, marveled at Shinji Mora's composure, though he was surprised he could be any more impressed with the boy than he had been before. It was true, Shinji was far more calmer than Shuya had managed. If Shuya could match it himself, maybe he could buy himself and his classmates more time to find an escape. Sakamochi burst into laughter. What an amusing suggestion, Miyamura. And then he offered a different solution. All right then. How about I kill Nakagawa? That would make everything fair, right? Not only Noriko, but all of the students tensed. She could see Shinji's back muscles stiffening behind his school uniform. Right away, Shinji said, I take it back. I give. His joking tone sent Sakamura into another burst of laughter. The insincere-looking soldier, who had already begun raising for his holster, returned his hand back to rest on the rifle shoulder strap. Sakamochi clapped his hands twice and said, All right, listen. You all have different aptitudes. Whether intellectual or physical ability, you all start unequal. So Nakagawa won't be receiving any medical attention. You there! No talking! With a shout, he threw a white object at Fujiyoshi, girl number 18, who was about to whisper something to the female class leader, Yuki Utsumi. For a second, she thought it was a piece of chalk, a guess that would have been apt back in another world. Thunk! Making the sound of a nail driven into a coffin, a thin knife sprouted from the center of Fumio's high and fair-skinned forehead. Yuki's eyes widened as she saw it, while Fumio made for a bizarre show, looking up, trying to identify the knife in her own brow. her head tilting back. Then in an instant, Fumio collapsed sideways. Her temple slammed against Yuki's desk, jolting it. This time, no confirmation was needed. Who could have a knife sticking out of their forehead and survive? No one moved. No one spoke. With held breath, Yuki stared down at Fumio. Noriko watched with a stunned expression. Shinji Mora pursed his lips and looked at Fumio, who had fallen into the same aisle as Yoshitoki. Shia forced his dry throat to swallow and thought, he did that because he felt like it. On a fucking whim! Our lives are at the mercy of this bastard, Sakamochi, or whatever the hell his name is. Whoops, I really did it now. Sorry, everyone, it's against the rules for the teacher to kill his students. He closed his eyes and scratched his head. Then his expression suddenly plain again. He said, but no more doing anything without permission. That includes whispering. I don't want to have to do it, but if you talk in class, I have plenty of knives. Shia gritted his teeth and told himself, wait. 2 of his classmates were dead already. Their corpses sprawled on the floor. Again and again, he repeated it to himself, wait. But Yoshitoki's face kept drawing his eye. He couldn't help it. He felt ready to cry. 40 students remain. Yay! And that's probably a good stopping point. That's where I stopped the first time. So that's 4 chapters. That's page 58. So we would pick it up at chapter 5. Because yeah, it's about an hour and a half it took me to read. Because I'm slow and I stumble upon words because what is English? I can put my book back on the shelf where it belongs. but so I'm like starting to remember. So I'm like, that's why I was like, couldn't help myself but like giggle when I like saw a couple of things. Because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, that's coming. So there are certain things that are coming, and certain things that it gets really good. It gets really good. So there's a lot of really good stuff that's coming. There's a lot of really interesting murder. There's a lot of really good death. And there's a lot of really good intrigue. There's a lot of good like character development and like a lot of good like alliances and stuff that happen. So like, yeah, I think I'll keep trying to read aloud because I think doing it this way is going to force me to actually read. Because if I just keep saying, oh, I'll just read like a chapter a night before I go to bed, I'm never going to do it. So like if I do it this way, it'll force me to read. So, you know, I don't know. If you want to watch it, then you can totally watch it. I'll rename this so, people know how many chapters I actually got through so they know. But, yeah, so that was fun. Maybe if I learn how to actually read again, I can actually learn how to read again. Maybe I'll start a little earlier next time so it's not 3 o'clock, almost 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like 2:40 right now. So maybe next time I'll start a little earlier so it's not quite so late when I'm actually ready to go to sleep because I do have to get up and go to work in the morning. It feels like I shouldn't have to. It feels like one of those, like, it feels like tomorrow should be a day off, but it's not. Yikes a million. Oh well. Anyway. All right, I'm going to go to bed. Actually, that's a lie. I'm going to listen to a redacted thing really quick because he put out some new updates. So I'm going to listen to his updates really quick and find out what's what. I think I know what's what, but I'm going to find out first. So I'm going to listen to those and then I'm going to go to bed. Yeah, so we'll listen to or we'll read some more Battle Royale a little bit later. Look forward to it, I guess, if you want. If you want to hear me stumble on how to read even basic English words, because apparently I don't know how to do that either. Because I don't know what that emotion was, that turamost and turalem word that I couldn't fucking pronounce, but that was a word that happened. So if you want to hear me mispronounce more English, please enjoy. If not, that's fine too. This really, I think, is going to help me with hopefully help me with my dyslexia. I've read that reading aloud helps with that. So hopefully it will. If not, anyway. But if anybody does watch this after hours, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night and or day. Have a good one and stay safe out there because, storms and such and COVID. So have a good one, you guys.